and welcome to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. I don't think I've committed any crimes.
We should be the judge of that.
Indeed, yes. Would you mind just doing a quick intro of yourself again?
All right, so welcome to the next episode of Penny for Your Thoughts, which I'm guessing is what the name of your podcast is, Steve?
Yep, it is, yes.
Excellent. I was thinking, I came up with a clever idea there, but clearly I was just too far behind the thing.
That was my eldest daughter's partner's suggestion.
Yeah, I honestly thought I might suggest spend a penny as well, but I think you're probably pissed all over that idea.
Thanks for the pun. Much appreciated.
Anyway, enough joshing aside. It's my pleasure to be here to sort of reverse Uno you, Steve, and I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Matt Taylor. I'm a software developer, sort of working in the engineering field. 50 years old, married, couple of kids, vegan. In the engineering stuff. That's where sort of we met Steve through some sort of pretty cool friends. I like to. Well, I got interviewed by Steve recently, and I was like, I want to know what Steve's answer to all these questions are. So I thought we'd, put them on the stovetop and turn the burner on high and see where we get to.
I'd like to say I'm looking forward to this. However, that wouldn't be the truth.
Excellent.
Let's see how we go.
I'm actually surprisingly chill about it.
It's quite nice
like being on that side of the table. Yeah, it's really good. All I've got to do is listen.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
So, I guess first of all, why don't you tell us what was the precipitate for starting a podcast? That's
quite a good question, actually. The reason I decided to do this, I've been listening to quite a lot of podcasts over the last probably 6 or 9 months or so, and I've found the medium to be quite an enjoyable medium to listen to. Most of the ones I've been listening to really do seem to be quite a conversational style rather than a sort of direct interview question and answer type session. It's usually a fairly rambling conversation type approach, which I quite like because I like to ramble myself. And I was looking for something for me to do outside of work that would, give me some satisfaction and distract me a little bit from the day-to-day stuff that I do. So I made a decision a few months ago that I was going to maybe try and set up a podcast, which is when I reached out to you and a few other people. And to be honest, I was quite surprised how many people actually responded. But, I've had about 15 or 20 people express an interest from that first round of emails. So it seems like there's some energy in the area around me to have these kind of conversations. So I've really enjoyed it as well. The few that I've done I think 10 of them now, and I've quite enjoyed the process. And I'm looking forward to the next month or so getting them out and getting them published and seeing what reaction I get, really.
Awesome. That's a great idea for it. And I'm a little bit surprised you didn't come up with it during lockdown or something, though, because it sounds like the perfect lockdown.
Yeah, there was a lot of other stuff going on during that period of time for me. And, I've got to a point where the business is kind of starting to get almost self-sustaining now, so it's requiring less of my energy, which is giving me a bit more free time. So that's been part of the process as well. I think that I needed to get to a point where I had some spare time because this isn't a quick thing to do. It takes a bit of energy and a bit of time to do. So I needed to make sure I had some time to get here.
Great. And so you advocate for a lot of headspace type sort of mental health stuff on LinkedIn and that sort of social media stuff.
Yep.
Is that sort of some of the reason why you decided to do this as well? Do you like
partly
the process?
Yeah, it's partly that. I think some of the conversations that I've had with people have been around the way they've dealt with particularly difficult situations. So there is a part of it that is about that mental health awareness and understanding that there's, that on the surface everyone might look okay, but if you delve a little deeper, you'll find that there's been stuff that's been quite challenging for most people to deal with, and seeing how different people deal with those issues. Some would hide from them, some will confront them, some will find some other method of dealing with the particular situation. It's good, I think, to show that there's a range of different things you can do. And it comes down to what suits you best, really. But it's not the overall intent of this is more for me just to have a chat with people. It's not really focusing on things like the mental health stuff. That's just part of the conversations that's happening.
Excellent. I'm loving it already, and yeah, it's nice being on the other side of this, and I'm loving what you're coming up with, because this is what probably everybody who listens to your podcast wants to know as well. So yeah. I'm lapping this up. So let's get back to basics. Who are you?
Who am I?
What who are you? What do you do?
That's actually quite
where are you at?
Yeah. So the who am I question is one that I've been focusing on quite a bit recently. The other thing that I've been doing alongside thinking about this podcast is tracing my family tree through Ancestry.com. And I'm kind of doing that as a sort of another hobby, I guess, really, to find a bit more out about my family. But, I'm Steve Penny. I'm 55 years old in 2 months' time. I'm English by birth. I've been living in New Zealand since 2010. I'm married to Chrissy, who is a Chinese Kiwi, and we have 3 grown children, Caitlin, Jonathan, and Lucy, who are 24, 22, and 20 years old, all of which are living away from home. Jonathan here in Christchurch, and Caitlin in New Plymouth, and Lucy in Palmerston North. We've got 2 dogs, Wilson and Mac, and a cat called Lizzie. And I'm running my own business, Honoris, which I've been doing since the sort of middle end of 2018, it's coming up to 5 years old now, which is quite an exciting thing for me. And I've actually been working, next year I've been working for 40 years in the same industry. So I've been working in the construction industry since I was 16. So it's been going on for quite a long time now. I'm starting to focus on closing out my career and looking at the next stage of my life, which is hopefully within the next 4 or 5 years retiring, and moving back into Europe to live my retirement. So somewhere warm. Hopefully, yes. The plan at the moment is Tuscany. So Tuscany in Italy. That's the plan at the moment. We're going to do a long trip over there next year, hopefully, and do some scouting around and look at the different parts of Italy and make a final decision where we want to be. But Tuscany is the one area that we've both said we really quite like, just because it's on it's on the west coast of Italy, straight into the Mediterranean. Always seems to be quite warm there. Seasonal variation in temperature is not too bad, and there's lots of vineyards and lots of good places to go and eat, and it's pretty accessible from there into the rest of Europe as well. And one of the things that Chrissy and I want to do is a lot of traveling, and a lot of that is probably going to be focused around Europe, because we like going to places like that have a lot of history, have been there for a long time, and has got a story to tell themselves. So we want to spend some time traveling around Europe and doing that, and also further afield. Unfortunately, doing that from New Zealand is cost prohibitive, I would say.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree with you. Okay, we're talking travel. So where's one place on Earth that you would really want to go? And you
there's actually 2. There's actually 2 places. Somebody else asked me this question in a meeting I was in. There's a place that I want to go to because of a family tie. So my grandfather fought in World War II. He was a bomb aimer on various different types of planes, Lancasters and other types of planes, and he was actually shot down and taken prisoner in 1942. And his prison was on the Baltic, in that part of Germany on the Baltic. And I would like to, if I can, get to the site of that prisoner of war camp, just because it's something that I think it would be quite sort of emotional touch point for me. He's the only person I directly know that was involved in the largest conflict the planet's ever known, and I think it's important to recognise that and sort of ground yourself in that. And there's also, and I can't remember the name of the place now, there's a place in Turkey that's been discovered in the last 3 or 4 years, which they are starting to think is the seat of modern civilization. They've done some excavations on this site, and they've found paintings and hieroglyphs and other things that indicate that they were showing how to do early farming, and the site's significantly older than other historic sites that have been uncovered. So I think it's about something like 10,000 years old. So it predates most of the other sites that they thought were the location for this sort of the birthplace of civilization. So it's something like that. It just shows you that we still don't know really where we all come from, and there's more to be found out. So those are probably the 2 places I really want to get to.
Excellent, good answers, interesting ones, both of them. Interesting to hear you talk about your heritage. And it's It's amazing to sort of see where we've come and where we're going to go. Like 10,000 years ago, I mean, we are just
not all of the improvements we've made have been improvements, really.
I mean, the central heating's gone quite well. So
not in New Zealand.
Yes, indeed. It'll probably happen over winter.
Yes.
All right, there's a question that I've heard rattled about, which I think is probably quite topical with where we're at as now. You said you've got a couple of dogs. There's a question asked if you could choose to either travel, but never have pets, or have pets but never travel.
See, that's a really, really difficult question to answer. One of the reasons we like the idea of being in Europe is with the dogs. We can have the dogs with us, and we can drive around to most of the places we want to go to, so the pets can come with us. But I mean, it's difficult to say what I would do given that choice. Hold a gun to my head, I'd probably say travel, because I think that will be quite fulfilling for me to do, and it allows me to spend time doing the other things I want to do. I want to do a lot more photography. I quite enjoy taking photos, but I'm very much a holiday snapper, and I want to change that to be a better photographer and look at thinking about composition and that kind of thing. So I think traveling would allow me to do more of that, and it also broaden my horizons, broaden my mind, give me access to lots of other experiences that having pets on their own wouldn't allow me to do. So if I'm honest, I'd say probably the travel, but it would be a difficult choice.
Yeah, I should imagine. Right, so we're just sort of touching on some sort of touch points there. So, your photography as a hobby. What do you do to get away from work and recharge?
Not very much. This podcast is one of those things, just because it's a different thing to do. Going away on holiday recently has been something else that we do. So in November last year, we went to Fiji, and we're planning another trip probably in July of this year to go back to Fiji for a couple of weeks as well, and spend time with my wife and go out for nice meals, that kind of thing. And I've started organising some social events. So I've got a sort of work-related one where a group of people that are all working in the construction industry catch up once a month, have a few beers, have a bite to eat, and try not to talk too much about work, just to sort of socialise a bit more. And I've got another group that's I've called the Four Yorkshiremen, because it's all older men who like to complain about the younger generation. And it just seemed the Four Yorkshiremen seemed like the appropriate name for that group. So we catch up once a month as well, and just have a few beers and have a bit of a moan about the youth of today and how they don't know they're alive and all that kind of stuff. So that's probably a sort of combination of those things, really.
Four Yorkshiremen of the apocalypse.
Yes, indeed. The Four Yorkshiremen of Monty Python fame.
Okay, well, that's a good one. Okay, so still staying on your personal life. What's your proudest moment of your personal life, and then I guess let's flip that over into your professional life.
Personal life, proudest moment. I would say that reaching the milestone of being married for 25 years was quite a proud moment. When you look at, we know a lot of married couples that have all become unmarried recently. And I think reaching that milestone in the current sort of environment seems to be quite an achievement. One of extreme stubbornness on the part of me and my wife, I think, more than anything else. But it's a milestone that we celebrated with a group of friends last year, because last year was our 25th wedding anniversary, and that was it was a really nice event. Had 10 people round for dinner, and had a nice catered meal, and it was really it was a really good thing to do, and I think that was probably what I would say. Closely followed, obviously, by the birth of my 3 children.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Congratulations on the 25 years. That's
thank you.
Pretty spectacular work, to be honest. So how about you
professionally?
Professionally, yeah.
Well, one thing I've wanted to do for a very long time was set up my own business, and so setting up Honoris was a real achievement for me, and I'm proud of the reputation that we're building as a business in the market that we're in. So I'd say that's probably up there, but I think as well, the time in the Middle East, when I first got over there and started working at WSP, the projects that we were getting involved with, like the one that I was working on, the Expo Plaza project, which was the massive project, actually getting involved with that and getting up to speed with it really quickly, and being able to communicate with that team of 40 odd people within a week or two of starting, and actually delivering a good concept design. Unfortunately, as the GFC landed, which meant the project stopped, but that whole process, moving away from my family, taking on that risk, and delivering a really good outcome for the concept stage on that project, which was thousands of pages of documents. I'm quite proud of that, given the circumstances around it. And then I guess there's a number of projects that I worked on in the UK that I'm very proud of, which are all healthcare related. So I did a lot of work for the Royal Marsden Hospital, which is focused on cancer treatment, and we did the design for a new operating theatre for treating paediatric cancer patients. And that really sticks out in my mind, that we completed that operating theatre. They only had one theatre. We built another one, so they doubled the capacity they had for treating children with cancer, which, I think that sort of thing has a massive impact on people, and it's a real positive impact. So, choosing the one of those, I'd probably say the Royal Marsden Hospital project would be the one that sticks out for me.
Excellent. So, you talked about a lot of the sort of work you've done over the years, but how were you inspired to, what inspired you to choose sort of the career path that you're doing? And
I wish I could say I chose it.
Did it choose you?
Well, no, my dad chose it, actually. When I was 16 years old, I'd just finished what were called O levels at the time back in the UK. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and my dad decided that I wasn't going to carry on. I think the phrase he used was sponging off him at the ripe old age of 16. So he said, "I'll get you a job." And I, at the time, I really had no idea where it was going to go. But I started work for the company. He's a pipe fitter welder by training, and he was working for this company that did design and build mechanical projects, a company called Enger Air Conditioning in the UK, and got me a job there as an apprentice. And I spent the next 4 years there doing training, going and doing an OND and an HND at the South Bank Polytechnic at the time, but South Bank University now. And then, that's where it started, and I've sort of progressed from there. So it wasn't really a choice. And there's been a couple of times in the sort of the early years of my career where I was offered alternative careers. I was approached by a couple of banks that were looking for people to sell pensions, and it was the money that was being offered was hugely different to the money I was earning as an engineer, but I just didn't like the idea of doing that, and I was quite enjoying the engineering stuff that I was doing at the time, so I never took those opportunities. But yeah, I mean that's so. Yeah, my dad chose my career, but if I look back on it, I wouldn't change it because of what it's allowed me to do. You know, I've travelled around the world. I've met my wife. There's so many positive things that have come out of it, including having my own business and being reasonably successful at it. That I would never change it for sure.
Excellent. So, would you say that the job you do is sort of fits the way your brain works, or would you say that doing this job has sort of made you think more like that?
I would say, I mean, I've been told by quite a few different people that I'm not a typical engineer. And I think a lot of that is my ability to. Well, it's the shirt. It's the shirt. It's the fact that I can actually talk to human beings. I think is another one that's part of that process. Because most engineers, particularly structural engineers, really struggle to speak to people unless they've got a spreadsheet. And I think so I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that the job has shaped me. I think I've chosen the career that I've chosen because it allowed me to do what I wanted to do. So my focus has always been on relationship building. That's what I do, and that's what I'm good at. And so most of the jobs that I've had have been around bringing teams together and building the relationships with those team members and building relationships with external parties such as the client and architects and others, and that's why I've been successful, because I can do that. And so I'd say that I've kind of shaped my career to suit my personality rather than the other way around.
Excellent. Good answer.
Thank you. And I've not even thought about
that. So let's talk about challenges in your life, but let's start with professional and then let's get back to personal after that.
Professional challenges. Biggest challenge I would say was again the Middle East. That the global financial crisis landed in Dubai in about 4 weeks after I got there. So I arrived in October 2008, and in November 2008 the world fell apart. And the next 6 months for me were really difficult because my role at WSP was basically getting a list of names at the end of each month, and then taking those people from their desk to a room, taking them into a room where there were other people that were telling them that their career was over, and then escorting those people off the site. So basically taking their keys and other things off them that were for WSP and showing them out the front door, which, the first month that was hard. The worst bit for me was there was a young HR lady with me on that first day, and she had a list of 30 names and I had a list of 31, and the 31st name was hers. So at the end of the day, after we escorted 30 people out the building, I had to ask her to come with me and do the same thing for her, which that was really difficult for me to do. And the next 5 months, it was the same every single month. There was the only one time that I had the HR person with me was the first month. After that, there was no HR left. So it was just engineers. And by the end of that period of time, I don't know if you recall, Matt, but my name on the floor was basically death, because that was my job. I was the Grim Reaper. I came in and I escorted people out the building. And, I was the front face of it because nobody saw anybody else until they were in that room. So whilst I wasn't actually telling people they hadn't got a job, as soon as people saw me on the floor, they wanted to leave because they didn't want to be taken down. And there was, it got to the point where I didn't know any of the people on the list. I'd never met them, never spoken to them. So I was going around asking people I knew, do you know where so-and-so is? And no one would tell me. And, that was really hard. And it's probably the biggest challenge I've had in my career. And it resulted in me leaving after 5 months. After 6 months, I couldn't do it anymore. I found out that my name had been on the list twice and taken off twice in that period of time. And I just had enough of this. I can't do this anymore. Yeah. So I left and joined another small consultancy over there, who then made me redundant 18 months later. So yeah, not a happy experience, the Middle East for me overall, but that would say would be my biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean,
yeah, the way I looked at it
was, oof.
Yeah, that was really horrible. And I was told if I said anything, I'd be the one following her. So, I had no choice. But the thing it's horrible being made redundant, but at least it only happens once in a day. When you've done it 150 times, it's soul destroying, especially if you've got any empathy at all. If if you're a human being that has feelings, then doing that 150 times is horrible. It's just horrible. So yeah, I've only had to make one other person redundant since then, and I don't ever want to do it again. It's not a nice experience. So personal challenges. What's my personal challenge? There's a few things. I think in the early days of my marriage to my wife Chrissy, we, after just literally probably 3 months after we got married, or 2 months after we got married, Chrissy fell pregnant. Or at least we realised at that point she fell pregnant. It was pretty soon after we got married she actually fell pregnant. But by the sixth month, she went in for a routine scan on her own, because it was a routine scan. And we found out at that routine scan that it wasn't very routine at all, that the baby was close to dying. The fetus was close to dying at that point, because it had what's called a cystic hygroma, which is basically a fluid-filled sac that covered its whole head. And we were told that basically we had to terminate the pregnancy at 6 months, which resulted in Chrissy having to go through a full probably 8 hours of labour, because she was at that stage in the pregnancy. And that was really tough on both of us. I mean, we literally were 6 months into our married life and going through the worst experience possible. We had to leave the maternity ward of the hospital with our bags and no baby, surrounded by people who were leaving the maternity ward of the hospital with their bags and babies. And it was the longest and saddest walk I can remember, to be honest. So that was a horrible experience. But we focused on us after that, and we were there to support one another, and we spent a bit of time thinking about who we were and what we wanted to do, and realized that together we were better than on our own, because it was one of them things where you could easily see that we would then split up because of the stress that it caused. But we decided we wanted to be together and carried on. And, I'm forever grateful for that, because we've now got 3 wonderful grown-up kids. The first pregnancy was pretty nerve-wracking after that experience, I have to say. Yeah. Right the way through until Caitlin was born, we were, the hospitals were great. They were, because this thing is potentially a genetic thing. So we had lots of tests, and they were closely monitoring everything all the way through the first pregnancy. And then Caitlin came along, and they did the same again with the second pregnancy. And then after that, they said, well, the third one, you've been no issues, we'll be fine. And we were kind of much more comfortable by then as well. So I think, that experience was really tough, but we learned a lot from it. And I think that's probably what I would say. I learned a lot from those challenges, and I'm hoping I can employ some of what I've learned in my life and make better decisions because of it.
And that's, when you talk about the hospital and putting in another operating room,
exactly,
theater, that makes a massive impact to, other families that would have been in not the same position, but certainly just as heartbreaking and nerve-wracking. Yeah. So interesting to hear you talk about the sort of that sort of 6 month stage where you just both were talking about what you wanted from life and stuff like that, and to move on. I don't want to. I'm just going to move on from that, because that's fine. Heartbreaking, but you talk about your perspective and how that sort of you changed that there. Can you tell me of another time sort of when you changed your perspective, or
I'd sort of move away from the personal stuff, the professional life. I met Chrissy working at a company called Atelier 10, and the guy that founded that business, a guy called Patrick Bellew, who's actually I think he's my next guest on this podcast. He was, I would describe him as visionary. So in the mid-90s, his focus was on sustainable design. And before anybody was thinking about sustainability, really in any real terms, he was really focused on how we can design buildings better. And he wasn't focusing on the services; he was focusing on the whole building itself. And the analogy is that you've got to think of the building as a complete system. If you take out parts of it and do those in isolation, you end up with an inefficient building. It doesn't matter which part you take out. So you have to think about the whole thing. And that isn't something that I'd really thought about at any point prior to that. And that, from a professional perspective, that's the way that I now look at every single project. What are we doing, and how does that impact on the rest of the building, and what can we change to make it work better? So I would say that that's probably the point of, that sort of first 6 months working with him and understanding how he viewed the design process is probably the thing that really fundamentally changed my perspective on what I did as a career. And I've carried that forward. So that's 26 years ago now.
Yeah. I mean, because I do like a bit of carbon stuff, yeah. and we created an app for Revit back in 2012, and that was pretty visionary then to have something that you can calculate the carbon for your building in Revit, in 2012, but to have that sort of 15 odd years before that, that's very impressive.
20 years before it, almost.
Yeah.
But he was, So that's, I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with him because of that. I think he's teaching at Yale now. He's a visiting professor, and so he's an amazing man.
Okay, well, we're talking about sort of 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago. If you could go back, to your 20-year-old self and offer yourself one piece of advice, what would you say?
Well, the boring answer to that question is, please God, put some money in your pension fund. But I think that's kind of everybody would say that.
I think I said that myself.
Yeah, I think that really the piece of advice I would give, and it's one that I've actually followed, I would say, from that period of time, is take every opportunity that's offered to you, because you don't know where it's going to go. And if I'd not taken some of the opportunities that I've been offered, like going to the Middle East, I would have regretted it in the future, because it gave me an opportunity to prove myself in a way that I hadn't done prior to that. And moving jobs, I've always been one to look at for an opportunity, and I spent my first 4 years working as an apprentice, and then I moved off and worked for a big contracting company for a few months. Really hated that, but I'm glad I did it. And then I got offered a role at the BBC, and I jumped at that opportunity because the BBC is a big, iconic organisation, and being involved inside that organisation, thought it'd be fantastic for me. And that was when I was 20. That's when I started there, and I really enjoyed that whole process of being there. So that was 1988 to 1996. That's where I worked, and then I took the opportunity to move on from there and joined Atelier 10 in 96, and that's where I met my wife. So taking those chances, taking those opportunities have given me so much that I would definitely say that's the piece of advice I would give. And fortunately, I must have heard myself, because I did do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sort of ties in quite nicely with sort of the next question is, is there something that you regret? So, I mean, it sounds like you take all the opportunities. Is there an opportunity or a decision you made that you wish you'd changed, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I look back at the decisions I've made. I mean, there's been some of them that haven't worked out the way I wanted them to, but the thing that I guess I'll focus on is that even if it doesn't go right, I learn something. That I've tried something and it hasn't worked. That's fine. Sometimes things don't work. And so I wouldn't say there's anything. The only things I'd regret would be things that I didn't try. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head at the moment that I haven't tried, other than maybe selling pensions. I don't regret that, although I don't regret that decision.
You might have sold yourself one. It might have been good.
Yeah, but that's the only regret. I think, what would I decision? I think the regret would only be that I haven't put anywhere near enough money away for my retirement, and so that's stressing me out to some extent. But that's what this business is for. I'm building this business as my pension fund. I want it to be successful, and I want it to carry on because that's how I'm going to retire. So that's why I'm doing that. But I can't think of anything really that I regret. I've had some really tough things to go through, but I've learned from each one of them. So I wouldn't really change them because I wouldn't be who I am if I had.
It definitely make us who we are. I think of those 150 people, 151 people that you've let go, and without that, you wouldn't be the boss you are, I'm sure.
No, I think I think the reason I kept up being asked to go back and do it is because I was able to be empathetic towards these people and help them through that process, which it was soul destroying for me, and I'm sure it was horrible for them, absolutely horrible for them, but they only went through it once.
Yeah, and I think for the listeners out there who sort of haven't been to the UAE, if you don't have a job, you don't have a visa, so you're basically sending 150 people back to their home countries.
Yes,
unless they can get another job to stay on,
Yeah, and in some cases, if you've got a car loan and you can't pay the car loan, you end up in prison. So there's no mucking around. So losing a job is really quite a difficult time because there's a lot of stuff that's that you've got to deal with that isn't really common elsewhere in the world. You get made redundant somewhere else in the world, you're not going to end up in prison. You get made redundant in the UAE, if you're not careful, you'll end up in prison, which is not something you want to do.
No,
so
it's certainly not if your family's over there with you.
No, exactly, yeah. Yes.
Right. So you're talking about your dad, like at 16, get out in the house, kick you up the bum. Here's a new job. I don't care if you like it or not. Who's the biggest influence in your life and why?
If I look at professionally, I'd say there's probably two people that have been a big influence on my life. There's Patrick, who I've spoken about at Atelier 10 because of the way he approached design, and he was a really, really visionary engineer and really changed the way that I looked at what we do for a career. But there's another guy that I met when I came to New Zealand, a guy called Keith Davis, who he was the sector lead for healthcare for Australia and New Zealand for Norma Disney Young, and he became my mentor over here very quickly, and he was extremely supportive of me and gave me a huge amount of advice that has really helped me in my time in New Zealand and helped me make some good big decisions I had to make. So I would say probably those two people because of the impact they've had on my professional life. Personally, it's difficult to say. I mean, my dad's been a big influence. Not always a positive one, but he has been a big influence on my life. And, circling back to another question, is there something I regret? There was a period of time when my dad and I were not the best of friends, shall we say, with very similar personalities, and we clashed quite a lot. And I probably do regret that because I missed out on a period of time of having a good relationship with my dad. But, that over the last 10 or 15 years that's changed, and we have a pretty good relationship now. So I'd say that thinking about it personally, I regret that I missed out on a chunk of time with my dad because I was stubborn and hard-headed and not willing to compromise my position on things. So I think that would probably be that. But yeah, there you go, kind of answering two questions there, sorry about that.
Bonus question.
Yeah.
That's 2 pennies.
2 pennies for your thoughts. Yeah.
All right. Got a bit of a off-piste type question here for you, and
okay.
This one's probably the most serious of the day.
Yep.
So you've got coffee, you've got cheese, you've got alcohol, and you've got chocolate.
Yep.
Pick two.
Alcohol and cheese.
Alcohol and cheese. Interesting.
What is that?
Even.
I'm just thinking wine and cheese when I'm in Italy sounds good.
Oh gosh, you're not wrong there. Oh yeah, Tuscany. Oh yeah, don't get me started. So I guess probably about time for maybe there's a question that you want to ask yourself so that, people can know a bit more about you, because, there's always that thing that there's that thing about you that nobody else knows, that is maybe the most interesting thing about you, but because, like, do you knit? Do you stand on your head to decompress? What
do I do? Something that not many people know. I mean, anybody who knows me very well will know that I am a football fan. I've been not a lifelong football fan, but I've been a fan of Arsenal Football Club since I was probably about 16 properly. Started going regularly to games when I was about 18 or 19, I'm actually still officially a season ticket holder at the Emirates Stadium in the UK, even though I haven't lived in the UK since 2008.
Wow.
That season ticket is held by my best friend, and he sells it on to somebody each year, and that person goes to the games in my place. But so that's probably one thing that not many people know about me. But I would also say that I'm actually quite an emotional and shy person, and one of the other reasons that I'm doing this podcast is to face down my fear of public speaking, I guess, to some extent. I've joined Toastmasters, and I regularly go to Toastmasters meetings here in Christchurch to put myself outside my comfort zone, because the dread of standing up in front of people and talking to them is huge for me. And I get to a point where I feel physically sick and absolutely shaking to my boots if I have to speak in public, which, given my role in my business and given the fact I can sit in a meeting room with 30 other people in it and control that meeting room without a second thought, is quite surprising, I guess. But I don't know why I can sit in a meeting with lots of people in it and be in control, and stand in that same room in front of that same group of people with a lectern between me and them and not be in control. But there's something in my head that says that I can't do that. And that's been a problem for me throughout my life, really. And I think there's a lack of confidence, and I guess there's also a bit of an imposter complex thing going on with me, that I don't think I'm good enough. So I doubt myself a lot in those situations, even though, I'm very experienced and actually, blowing some smoke up my own backside, I'm pretty bloody good at what I do. I lack that confidence when it comes to certain circumstances like that. So that's probably something that a lot of people don't know about me.
I think if you don't have imposter syndrome, you're probably egotistical, in my opinion. I think everybody who's good at something, because they've been learning those things for so many years, start to think of them as commonplace, but then they just be like, oh, everybody knows that, right? But the ego will always be like, yeah. All right. So, all right. Another sort of off-piste one for you.
Yep.
You can meet any person for dinner.
Yep.
Real life, made up, living, dead.
Mm-hmm.
Imaginary or otherwise.
Yep.
Who would that be?
Who would that be? Well, there's probably two answers to that question. One of them would be, I'd actually really like to meet a guy called Herbert Chapman. Herbert Chapman was the manager of Arsenal Football Club in the 1930s. He was the most successful manager of the football club for quite a long time after that. And he introduced a whole load of different things into the football club that have been part of the club ever since, including things like having numbers on the back of the shirts and things like that he introduced, that became adopted by everybody across the Football League, and a few other things that he did. And I think it would be really interesting to speak to him and just sort of spend a bit of time talking to him. But that's one. The other person, probably as a result of what I'm doing on Ancestry about my family, is my Dad's mum died when he was about 16 or 17. So I've never met her. I'd really like to meet her. Just because she's my paternal grandmother, and she was, by all accounts, quite an interesting lady. She had a very dour and strict Scottish husband, but she stood up to him and controlled him quite well. So she must have been a very strong woman. Unfortunately, she did pass away a long time before I was around. So, well, not that long, about 5 or 6 years before I was born. So I've never met her, and I think that would be a really amazing thing to do.
So you meet your paternal grandmother for dinner.
Yep.
What do you wear?
What do I wear? Now, there's a good question. I want to be well dressed. I think. I wear my clothes almost as a suit of armor to some extent. If I'm not properly dressed, I lack a bit of confidence. So, I like to wear a nice iron shirt, and I like to wear nice clean shoes, and I like to wear a nice jacket. And I've taken to wearing waistcoats again quite recently, so I'll wear quite a lot of different waistcoats. So I'd probably be dressed something like that, I would say. So shoes, trousers, nice shirt, iron shirt, waistcoat, and a jacket. Right. Just because it just that's how I feel the most comfortable.
Yeah. All right. So you step out on the field to play for Arsenal.
Yeah. Okay. You've never seen me play football, have you? There's a reason for that.
Well, I mean, the question's illustrating how much I know about football as well. What number shirt are you wearing?
God. Well, one of my favourite players is a guy called Ian Wright, and Ian Wright was a striker for Arsenal from the sort of very late 80s into the mid to late 90s. Actually, I think he was a bit later than that, but I would say number 8 because his shirt was a number 8 shirt. I just like his passion and the way he played the game. He's now a podcaster, and I listen to his podcast quite regularly. But I think that just because he's still so connected to that club, Arsenal is part of his DNA really, and as soon as he was playing there, he was never really tied to any other club. He went and he left when he reached the end of his playing career. He left and he played for a couple of other teams, but he's now still. He's always talks about my club and my team, and he's really passionate. And because of that passion, because of the way that he played the game and how joyous he was when he played the game, I think that would be why I'd wear that shirt.
That's a good one too. And the 8's infinity sideways, so it's just keeps going, doesn't it? It
does keep going. Keeps going forever.
So, all right, just a final, off the piste one. You have to live one place in the world for the rest of your time.
Mm-hmm.
Where would that be?
Cool, blimey. That's a tough one. Where would I be if I could only live in one place? Well, I think I would still go with Tuscany, actually. If I had to live somewhere for the rest of my life, that's the plan, is to live there. Am I allowed to travel anywhere, or have I just got to stay in exactly that location?
Stay there.
But go within walking distance of the house.
Yep. Well, within the limits of the city.
Yeah, I would say I pick a location in Tuscany and stay there because the scenery is amazing, the location's amazing, the climate's amazing. I could think of a lot worse places to spend my time.
Culture, cheese, wine.
Exactly. Pasta. Pizza.
Import everything else, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Pizza by the kilo.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think I've exhausted my off-piste-ery.
Okay.
So thank you for taking up my offer of letting me reverse you.
Weirdly enough, I've actually quite enjoyed it. It's been quite a good conversation.
I've enjoyed it too. Yeah. It was nice to sort of hear the answers to the questions that I wanted to ask you when you were interviewing me. So, it's nice to let your listeners hear more about you. And for those of you out there who don't know Steve, he's looking very relaxed, and he is not having trouble talking to a crowd of people at all. No. So he's clearly
crowd of one.
Clearly successful.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. It's been great talking to you again, and I'm really looking forward to getting a few of these out and published now, and starting to get them into the airwaves, so that hopefully other people can listen and hopefully enjoy the journeys, because there's a lot of journeys out there.
Yeah, everybody's got something going on.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's
all of our challenges. We've all got our things that make our hearts sing.
Yep.
And
very true.
Break. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Much appreciated.
It's been my pleasure. This has been fun.
Thanks, Matt. I'll speak to you soon, mate. Look after yourself.
Take care, you too. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you. If you want to find out some more, please do get in touch, and maybe we can have you on in a future show. Thank you.